We're doing press-in wheel bearings on a '06 Ford Escape. Let's get to it. First thing we want to do is take our brakes apart. Got a 7mm Allen in the back of these caliper bolts. There's a little black plug on the back of them. Pop that off. We're going to zip these guys out. We got these little clips on the brakes. A little clip. Hopefully they'll come out of there. You don't want to break these. Sometimes they're rusted into the little hole. You might have to clean them up, spray them down with some blaster. Now these little brake sliders, this hardware here, they usually get stuck. You take a little screwdriver and press them back inside here, and they'll come out through the back. We're going to use a little extender on this one. On the top one, brake hose is in the way. Let's see if I'm tall enough to get a look in this. There we go, press that one back. You're gonna get right in the edge of the rotor. Press that piston back a little bit so that this comes off. There we go. Now we want to break mounting bracket off. That's going to be an 18mm for us. Just going to give her the old zipperoo. Need a short extender for the top one to get the impact in. Don't let your bracket fall down. Rotors, you gotta hammer off most of the time. If you're saving your rotor, hit the flat spots, not the rotor itself. This one popped off. All right, so we need the steering knuckle off. So we need to take the strut off, ball joint, tie rod, little 8mm on the wheel speed sensor, 10mm up here. Yeah, we gotta take this off because it's in the way of the nut for the strut. I will start off with just getting this guy out of the way. And once you get your steering knuckle off, you're going to need some sort of press to press the bearing in and out. If you don't have one, you might be able to rent one or take it to a shop and they'll press the bearing out and in for you. Charge you some money. I know a few shops that do that. I'm going to be using a shop press to press the bearing. Now these wheel speed sensors don't come out real easily most of the time, but this one is coming out easily. There's that sensor. And we can work on our tie rod now. I already took the cotter key out. And we've got a 19mm on that guy, on the castle nut. Ooh, and that tie rod just fell right out. Usually you got a hammer on the steering knuckle. Well, that nut just went flying. Get over here. There we go. All right, now our tie rod's off. We're gonna take our strut bolts out. Zip that nut off and put it back on loosely, a few threads. Now it's spinning on the other side. We need to grab our 18mm wrench. This one started backing out on its own. That's great. Grab a hammer. Pop those out as far as we can. Usually don't slide out or spin out easily at all. I'm going to take a little screwdriver, use it as a punch. Right in the middle, don't hurt the threads. Give it a little pop. Go. Pull this forward a little bit, just a little. You don't want to pull your axle out of its boot or anything. Got a 34mm on the axle nut here. Probably going to want an impact for that. If you don't have an impact, probably take that nut off first, putting pressure on the brakes. There's this little hole in the axle, that's for an air chisel, in case your axle is seized to the splines of the wheel bearing. And this one, I am going to use an air chisel on. Alright, we've got our air chisel here. Just want to get that pushed out of there. Now it's all the way backwards. Alright, we got a 15mm on this nut for the ball joint. I think it's a 13 on this side. Looks like that'll do. 13. We're going to take that nut off. Alright, and the bolt started sliding out for us, that's good. Now this axle will kind of just get out of our way. We got this groove in the bottom of the steering knuckle. You can kind of open that up with an air chisel. See what we got here. That'll work. It's just going to help grab that ball joint, loosen that ball joint up without hurting it by opening that up. Just opening it a little bit. Don't want to crack the steering knuckle or anything. We're just going to spread it out. Be careful. Don't hurt your ball joint boot. There we go. And that was easier than most of them. Now we got our steering knuckle out. It's time to move over to the press. Here we got the steering knuckle on the shop press. And yeah, sometimes you got to get a little creative. I've been meaning to build myself some different I-beams that the hubs fit around. That would really help. But I got some wood stacked up and some press plates. Got this little piece of metal to even it out. Because sometimes these press out easy and sometimes they don't. Let's see what happens on this one. Try to center it a little bit. We'll call it good enough. You want to be as straight as possible. See, I was afraid it might start angling that press plate like that. I'm just going to keep on rolling with it though. Oh, the hub just broke free. This is stage one, getting the hub out. Looks like it might catch on that piece of wood there. There we go, and our hub is out. On these hubs, what likes to happen is these get stuck on there, the inside. I have a video on how to take those apart in my car repair playlist. But the kit came with a new hub and bearing. Paid the extra $15 or whatever, so I don't have to worry about extracting that. All right, we got that steering knuckle. We got a big socket that fits perfectly over the outside of the bearing race, so it presses it out. Moved up a peg on the shop press. And hopefully she comes out easy. That dust cover's getting bent a little bit. That's all right. It's all rusted. There she goes. And these really stiff ones, you can use a little heat to help. And there is a retaining ring to take out in between the hub and the wheel bearing. I got a video on taking them out too. And our bearing should just fall right down. There it goes. All right, we're all set to press this wheel bearing in. Put a little bit of grease on that wheel bearing, you know, just to help it slide. And we cleaned out that bore really well. I used my Dremel tool to clean out the really rusted part where the retaining ring goes in. I used the old wheel bearing to press the new wheel bearing in, then put a big socket over that. And the most important thing is to go real straight. Make sure you get your press real straight. Had to use just one press plate on the bottom to even it out. No press plate on the other side. I've had this Harbor Freight 20-ton shop press for years now. Still working like new. And the only thing I've done is bent up that I-beam a little bit, doing some stuff I shouldn't have, but I want to make multiple I-beams for this to fit different steering knuckles and whatnot. And this wheel bearing is pressing in real nice and smooth. Now that bearing's going to sit just underneath that retaining ring. Eventually you'll feel it get tight. You don't want to tighten down too much and crack the back of the steering knuckle out. And that is getting tight right there. She's all the way in. It helps to have different chunks of metal laying around. We've got a couple things there, old wheel bearings, old balancer cones, but there we go, now the bearing's in. All right, we put our snap ring in. Goes right here. Now it's time to get the hub in. I just used that same thing and flipped it around, the socket and the bearing. But we need to straighten it. See, I'm a little off center here. I used a bearing cone from my bearing kit. You can use a bearing press kit as well to do this job. You can rent them from auto parts stores, but I've got a bunch of different little cones. So I'm going to straighten this up a little bit. Release the pressure a little. There we go. I did not start pressing it yet. Sorry about the camera right now. I'm just trying to straighten this cone out with one hand. There we go, that's a lot better. Now the big thing is get your press centered in that hub. You want to be nice and straight pressing this in. So I used that little cone so the inside of the bearing doesn't try to come backwards out. A little support. And it is pressing in like a dream. Super easy. Super straight. And that hub is going to bottom out on the inner race of the bearing. There we go, it just seated. And there we go. Now our steering knuckle's assembled. We can go back to the car. First thing we're going to do is put that steering knuckle on this ball joint and then feed the CV axle through. And then press that steering knuckle into place here. Put a bolt through the ball joint. Put the new axle nut on there loosely and start reassembling everything. Remember to check your torque specs on your axle nut. Parts store will tell you what that is, or you can look it up online. But there's always a torque spec. They can range from 75 to close to 300 foot-pounds. You never know. It'll cause premature bearing failure if you don't have the torque right.